and supply chain security. Cloudsmith is your cloud-native, universal artifact management platform. We support all your packages from your NuGets to your Docker images to your Python wheels. We also integrate with all your CI/CD. So today it's going to be a look back on trends in DevOps and supply chain security in 2023. So what kind of year has 2023 been for DevOps? Are people generating SBOMs? Are people asking for them? Were there any mad, crazy vulnerabilities like Log4Shell? And are we all using AI in our workflows? So we've three wonderful panelists. We've Glenn Weinstein. He's Cloudsmith's new CEO. He started in September. Delighted to have him. I'm going to bring you on stage. Hey, Glenn.
Hi, Kira. Thanks for having me.
And we also have Josh Bressers. He's VP of Security at Anchore. He's also a podcaster of Open Source Security Podcast. Totally recommend. Hi, Josh.
Awesome. Hi there. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. And last but not least, we have Luca Lanziani. He's head of DevOps and platform engineering at Nearform, and he's also a blogger. Hey, Luca.
Everyone. Nice to be here, everyone.
Hey, so we have a few bloggers and a CEO. I think we might have trouble keeping this under 30 minutes.
I love it.
But we'll try.
We will make it.
Yeah, so let's kick off. So I'm going to start with Glenn. So investment 2022 was kind of a tough year for tech. How has investment in DevOps and supply chain security been in 2023?
It may have been a tough year for tech, Kira, but DevOps continues to steam along as a major priority of software companies, of corporate spenders, and so forth. At least from my perspective, investments are way up. We've seen companies in the DevOps space funded. Startups are getting additional rounds of funding and attracting funding that maybe is getting shut off from other sectors into what's considered maybe a more manifest and legitimate sector. Cloudsmith is a great example of that. We took a significant round of funding earlier this year and had a ton of interest from VCs. But honestly, I'm not surprised at all because our customers, and I think software organizations generally, are learning that they need to take a much more defensive and approach of control of their to protect their software supply chains. We are living through dangerous times. I mean, open source public indexes are I wouldn't go so far as to call them cesspools, but there is a lot of stuff out there.
Hold back, Glenn.
I mean, you put the good with the bad. There's huge value, of course. Like we're never going back to, not using open source, but the militia or code with more broadly code with vulnerabilities. It is just rife with problematic packages and problematic projects, and it's getting a lot worse. And it's getting worse very fast. There's a huge number of open source projects that aren't maintained. And even if you look at projects that were maintained in 2022, a large drop off in what's being maintained in 2023. Many projects don't have proper code review processes in place. They're not doing branch controlling. There's just vulnerabilities that are so bad that companies in software organizations continue to download and use packages with known vulnerabilities months or years after the vulnerabilities are well known and the patches are widely available. So this space is definitely getting investment, and the reason to me is clear. We have suffered enough problems from an insecure software supply chain, and I think the world of DevOps is collectively waking up to the real issue.
Yeah, and on software security, Josh, has there been any mad vulnerabilities like Log4Shell, or was 2023 a little bit calmer?
So I think from the AppSec perspective, it was pretty calm. I mean, and this is obviously, we're looking at this through the window of Log4Shell, which was completely bananas for many of us, right? However, if you look at the security news, there have been an enormous number of high profile breaches that weren't necessarily AppSec related, right? You had 23andMe, and even LastPass happened in 2023, which feels like it was a million years ago now because there's just so much happening. But there have been a lot of things going on. So by no means has it been boring. I just think it has been less on fire, which feels boring sometimes.
Yeah. Why haven't I been called up at 3 a.m.
Right.
to?
Exactly.
Oh, I miss those days.
No one misses those.
And do you think part of the reason why it's a bit more boring is that we've taken on some DevSecOps practices and applied them?
No, I don't. Not at all. I think we're lucky. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. Open source is what it is. I mean, Glenn mentioned, all the vulnerabilities in all of this, and we've been doing this for decades at this point. And I think for the most part, we tend to get very lucky. I don't think a lot of the quiet we've experienced over the year is necessarily because of positive practices. There's things that are getting better. I think all of the arrows are pointed in the right direction, but we are on step one of a million-step journey. Like there's a long way to go.
Like, do you think that at the moment we're a lot lucky, but eventually that luck is gonna, like, we're gonna get less lucky and less lucky as the attackers kind of learn how to figure out who is vulnerable?
To a degree, sure. I think you can argue that. I mean, it's the perpetual cat and mouse game of security where attackers learn things, they take actions, and then we have to defend against them. And I think just in general, the world of computer security has gotten very lucky over the years. I think I remember, so I played American football when I was young. I was very, very bad at it. But I'll never forget, there was one game that at the very end of it, the coach walked up to us and just said, "Boys, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good." And he turned around and left. And I'm like, I don't think anyone's going to argue that.
That's something to take with you for life, I
think of it a lot. Yes.
Hey, and so do you find are people, one of the big things that's come out over the last 3 years is this idea of using SBOMs, supply chain bill of materials, like an ingredient list of all the packages in your software, including the open source. Have people started to generate them, even bad SBOMs? How are you seeing that?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, SBOMs are kind of Anchore's bread and butter. We have an SBOM scanner open source called SIF that's widely used. It's used by lots and lots of projects. And we're seeing a lot of kind of internal SBOM use where an organization brings in some software, maybe they're building it, maybe they're buying it, whatever, and they're creating SBOMs of it. And they're using that as just a historical archive of what they have and what's going on. There's talk of how we can start sharing these things, which I think will be a topic of 2024, I suspect. But for the moment, it's almost entirely internal use that we're seeing in the industry.
Yeah, and I know, Luca, you're involved in helping a lot of companies kind of scale up their DevOps, and that kind of stuff. Are you seeing people take on? Are they worried about the risk with supply chain security?
They've definitely been worried in the past. They're less worried right now. Unfortunately, we get more worried when there are big vulnerabilities. That's the cycle, right? The cycle is a new vulnerability comes out, everyone is worried, and then the worries goes to lower and lower and lower until security takes another side step. And eventually, when there's a new vulnerability, there you go. Now we want all the patches and everything. But yeah, definitely there is a little bit of a bigger push after the latest vulnerability on security, and the SBOMs are definitely coming out of the shadow, right? And we have seen that used in many companies. Are they being used effectively? That I don't know. I definitely see that there is an exercise to try to use them. They try to make the best out of them. Are they using the best tools for the job? I'm not sure, right? But definitely there is a movement there. What I noticed, and after the discussion you just had, right, is that we think there are less vulnerabilities, there is less noise, probably there is less vulnerabilities that we know about. That is my perception, right? I remember that we're never going to run out of vulnerabilities. There was an interesting discussion I had with a security expert that was complaining that every scan we had every month, we had more vulnerabilities than the one before. We never were running out of vulnerabilities, and I was like, that is to be expected. We're never going to get to zero, right? You can only patch so much. And that's the story of this industry. It's going to keep happening, right? You're never going to go to zero. And that's why more effort is needed. You need to get better at finding out vulnerabilities. You need to get faster at patching them. And the only thing that you can do is to reduce that time between the discovery of the vulnerability and you applying the patches. That's the only thing that you can do.
Luca and Josh, you both sort of described us as having a lucky year because it hasn't been as much in the news as in the past. I totally agree with you, by the way. But my concern for the ecosystem, Luca, is the time between discovery and remediation of the vulnerability is really just step one. Step two is getting people to stop using the vulnerable version And they continue to do that. I wish we could sort of omnisciently scan all of the code running in production in the whole world right now, and how much of that code has known vulnerabilities still running in production, almost these lurking time bombs that are out there. I bet you that would be a number that would scare everybody right back into compliance.
I don't know if it would scare everyone into compliance. I think
At least alarm.
humans are marvelous at ignoring problems until they can't.
Well, security experts are going to scream, but are they going to be listened to? Right? That's the thing.
No,
it's like, sure, we're going to patch it next week. It's fine. Right? You can stay there another week.
Right.
So do you think that like companies can be trusted to self-regulate when it comes to vulnerabilities? I know there was a recent legislation, like not passed yet, but coming close to being passed in the EU, the Cyber Resilience Act, where it mandated some security, like no vulnerabilities when you release or something like this. And also, I think your SBOMs and all this kind of thing. But do you think we need legislation because businesses, that's not what they're driven to, it's not their purpose. Like that's, you patch when you have to, but maybe you're exposing your customers' data and you need to be pressurized into being more secure. Anybody?
Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to take that. I talk about this a lot. So I have a podcast called the Open Source Security Podcast, and I talk about this exact topic on a regular basis, where I think expecting organizations to self-regulate is not it's just not practical. Because if you look at every regulated industry on the planet, every one of them has said they're going to go out of business if they have to follow some rules imposed upon them, and none of them did. Now, at the same time, this is not a problem we're going to see solved overnight or next year or even in the next decade. And the example I like to use is air brakes on trains. There was a guest I had on my podcast a long time ago. Her name is Carol Nichols. She wrote the Rust book, and she gave this marvelous presentation about train safety. It took 80 years from the time the air brake on trains were invented until they were implemented across the world. 80 years. And this was a problem that was literally killing people, right? We're not killing people constantly with our software. And if it took them 80 years, like, we have a long way to go. I'm not saying it's going to take 80 years, but it isn't going to take one either. So I think we also need to set that expectation, right?
Software moves faster. I'm sure we can make it better in less than 80 years. No, hopefully. But I agree. I agree. And we are from the regulatory continent, right? EU is famous for regulations, right? To put regulations up. And if you look at the industries, I agree with Josh, right? You have to look at the other industries. Look at the car industry. Look at the health system, right? Look at all of those. They have regulation. Regulations have to be in place for industry to adhere to those, to respect those, and so on. There is nothing bad about a little bit of regulation.
Not too much though, lads.
Of course. And look, that's a valid point. Bad regulation sometimes is worse than no regulation. So you do have to be careful of that.
I do like Josh's point, though, the direction you're heading, which is that regulation is essentially a shared cost, that if we agree to impose it equally on all parties, then we can move forward. That's the fundamental problem with a voluntary scheme is, there's a disincentive at the individual level to comply because of the cost.
Yeah.
But, software engineering, ever since I got in this business, and I'm pretty sure looking at the four of us, I'm the oldest person on this podcast webinar. We've been talking about software development as an engineering discipline ever since I was in graduate school. We all kind of know it's not, like, wink, wink, nod, nod. It's not really software engineering, but moving more towards an actual engineering discipline, I think, is the kind of the pursuit of a lifetime of anybody that's in this business. At least moving a little bit closer to making sure the bridges don't fall down, or the equivalent of that for civil engineering in the software world. So, Kira, you raise a great topic. I just think that even trying a little bit is good, to make software safer.
Yeah. So let's move on to the complexity in cloud native development, and actually that sort of ties into security. And I think 2023, there's been more talk about making it simpler to create cloud native applications. Luca, you probably know a lot about Kubernetes. It's such an amazing tool, and it's so flexible, but that flexibility leads to difficulties for engineers. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
And maybe more work for us, right? That is not a bad thing. It's jokes aside. So yes, it's definitely. I like to say that it's not complicated; it's complex. I just came back from a workshop we ran for a company on Kubernetes, and you could see at the end of the workshop how both developers and DevOps were more aware of what the system was and how that worked, right? And it makes the difference when you know the tool you're working with. It's like for everything, right? You don't go and just swim without having some swimming lessons and so on. And so that was the same for Kubernetes. What Kubernetes has done, from my perspective, though, is more than giving you a platform. It's giving you a common interface that is very useful in our business. Now we can talk the same language across clouds. We can talk the same language even on-prem. That is amazing from my perspective. Is solving some of the fundamental problems that we had for many times, like auto scalability and self-healing and so on. And that is all packaged for you. Now, sure, there is a little bit of a learning curve, but if you want to get better at it, again, you have to spend some time there, learn how it works, and then go and swim between the billions of tools in the CNCF landscape. That's probably the most challenging
Is
part,
there like
right?
there's over 1,000. There's like
It's
it's a lot.
Yeah, and we're gonna get more. I'm sure we're gonna get more.
Yeah, so I saw Microsoft had their big conference there, and they have this new framework for called Aspire, and it's meant to, it's one of those opinionated tools, but it's for cloud native development. So you cut out of the box, it's configured, and with some defaults that are secure, and so you can just create your cloud native application straight away, and you can easily pull in your message queues or whatever you want. So I can see 2024, I can see that continuing on. So,
I think there are going to be more tools like that. We're trying
yeah.
to move. There's this big movement of shifting left, right, moving closer to developers, where we're pushing some of the complexity to the developers, and while doing that, we're trying to simplify the way they can build infrastructure, build systems. But at the same time, we're not giving them enough tools or enough abstraction to, let's say, forget about what they're building and just focus on what they do best, right? Creating software. So again, to me, it's a cycle, right? We're going to go through this cycle. We're going to try to simplify this. We're going to try to put it in front of developers, and then we're going to realize that it's too much. And so we're going to go a little bit back and try to push a little bit more DevOps, back to infrastructure, and then again and again and again, because as Glenn said, we're not engineering yet. We're not in the engineering phase yet.
And actually on this, platform engineering, is this the new DevOps, or is it the same person? Is it just it's just like the culture has been changed?
So I was writing a blog post about that where I was actually, the title was DevOps are hurting themselves, right? DevOps was never meant to be a role, and yet it is a role, right? We keep talking about DevOps as a role. And I love the fact that developers we have different type of developers, right? Developers is not a role. Front-end developers is a role. Mobile developers is a role. Back-end developers is a role. And yet DevOps is the role. DevOps is the one that is going to configure your cloud native environment, the one that does AWS, the one that writes Terraform, the ones that does AWS, the one that does CI/CD in GitHub, GitLab, Jenkins, whatever, right? And then the one that does platform engineering is going to set up the whole platform for you. The same person, the unicorn DevOps.
Full stack developer, right?
Yes. So DevOps is the real full stack developer without writing software, though, right? And now we also have to write software, because apparently SRE is a thing, and SRE writes software. Is that a DevOps? So yeah, sorry, a little bit of a rant.
So DevOps is the new full stack developer.
We have to change that. That was the end of the blog post. DevOps have to change that. Cloud transformation is another one. The fact that we believe that everyone is in the cloud, and we realize that most of the companies, there is such a long tail of companies that are not in the cloud yet, and they have to still do that migration. Sometimes I admire how we think we are in such a state where everyone is using Web 2.0 and the latest technologies and everything, and it's not like that at all, right? It's not like that at all.
Yep.
And where do they normally start when they're doing their transformation?
It's easy. You take whatever is in on-prem and you move it to the cloud exactly the way it is on-prem.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the way you do it. So you just take a bare metal machine and you transform that into a virtual machine, and everything's gonna work fine.
I see some
right.
issues.
Oh yeah, but that is for the CFO to solve, right? That is for the
The
cost.
DevOps.
Yeah, the DevOps to solve later. No, it's amazing because you do that and then you see a big increase of cost because you haven't done things the proper way, and so you step back. I don't know if you realize, but there is a big movement right now to go back on-prem.
Yes.
Yep.
And so, and also at the same time, there's this FinOps movement. Have you like the kind of, like you were saying, this try to, as like the pressure is mounting to wrangle these cloud native costs and to get like more, to figure out how much it actually costs when you're doing a daily build and that kind of thing. I think it's FinOps. I'm calling it FinOps.
Yeah,
It is.
look, I think that ties into what Glenn opened with. Is there's a huge push right now in the whole industry to, watch costs and cut costs wherever possible. I mean, this is one of the things I'm seeing in conversations with customers and prospects is, how can we buy less tools? Can you do 2 things for us that we're doing today with 2 tools? And so I think the whole FinOps idea it's very real, and it's probably going to get more real next year for sure.
And I love what you say, Josh, because we started FinOps thinking about reducing the cloud cost, and now FinOps is turning into reducing any type of cost from tooling to everything else, right? The thing that I don't like is that we still talk about FinOps as reducing cost when it should be managed cost, not reducing.
Yeah, you're right, Luca. Well, this ties in. I think it's an extension of the trend towards everything as a subscription service. There was a recent piece, and I think I just saw it this morning, where Broadcom is pushing VMware away from perpetual licensing and forcing perpetual customers to move to subscription. On the one hand, it looks like corporate overlords are back at it, but on the other hand, it's just reality. Like, we pay for the drink as we go, and you pay for the deployments, you pay for every time that you kind of blush at AWS, they charge you a fraction of a cent. So better know what we're doing. You just have to have more controls over.
It's even worse than that, Glenn. It's not just subscription, it's per use, right? So the granularity went so fine that it's very difficult even to understand how much you're going to pay. We have clients asking us, okay, can you predict how much it's going to cost us to build this thing? And it became almost impossible to them to tell them the exact number. And we try to get closer and closer, but there is always something more that you can have to add there. And it's valid for everything. It's valid for every single part of the system.
Yeah, I would like to think. I think the perspective you gave, that it's not really about reducing costs, it's about managing costs, and that's a really important point here, because in the long run, there's no reason you can't be just as efficient, if not more efficient, in a FinOps managed world or a subscription or per usage managed world. The analogy that my dad has made for me in the past has been, it's very expensive, Glenn, to own a car. If you take an Uber or a taxi often, it feels expensive because you're paying per drive, but over the course of the month, probably cheaper to ride share than to own a car and all the expenses that go there. This is very similar, and it's just a matter of controlling and understanding what you're doing, and just making sure that you're being efficient, which is good. We always should have been doing that.
Yeah, there you go. And also, if you move to the cloud, it's going to cost you more, but it's also giving you more flexibility. It may be delivering to you more value because it allows you to create new things faster, to move faster in general. Isn't that a value? Is it that value? I mean, that is worth paying, maybe? Of course, it depends, right? The answer is always depends. It depends on the type of organization you are. If you're running a stable business, you don't want to do anything else, go to on-prem. It's fine, right? You're fine with that stable infrastructure. It's fine. But if you're someone that you want to push the boundaries, innovate, and so on, maybe you're better in the cloud.
Yeah, I also think organizations are typically challenged to calculate a true TCO on premise. That's a universal problem. At the very least, the software as a service model is a little more transparent. That these are your costs, and every time you take an action, there's a cost and there's a benefit. It's just good discipline.
For sure.
Now let's finish up with what everybody was talking about in 2023. It's AI. Have we finally started using it and incorporated it into our workflows? I know when I'm creating content, I'm like, basically, it's just me and ChatGPT all day. But are you seeing like it actually working in real life?
I'll jump in first.
Yeah, go for it.
It's always like a dicey question, right? So from my perspective, there's tools like GitHub has Copilot, right? You're seeing these kind of assistant AIs emerging here and there. And I know from a developer perspective, things like Copilot are amazing for productivity, right? There's a risk aspect of that as a security person, I've got my risk hat on all the time, that we don't know all the answers to yet. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations that happen over the next year around some of that aspect of it, around some of the safety angles, where's this content coming from? How's it getting produced? Like, what are my rights to use it or not use it or whatever? But I think all in all, I forget who said this, but the saying is basically a human with AI is going to replace a human without AI. AI isn't going to replace humans. And I think that's kind of all of the things I see are pointed in that direction, because I find, even from my perspective, and I'm not like a super heavy AI user by any means, but I can get so much more done using this technology as a tool, right? It's not magic. It's not replacing me. It's not doing a better job than I can do, but it lets me work a lot faster, I find.
I love and I hate it, unfortunately. I realize that it makes me lazy, and that's the part that I hate.
That's the dream.
Right? No, I don't. I mean, I love solving software problems, but I also realize that I can ask the AI, right, ChatGPT or whatever, to give me the algorithm. It's gonna, bring it up 10 times faster, if not more, right, than me. And that's why I love it, because it allows me to solve problems faster. Of course, I'm gonna double check what it's produced, but at the same time, I hate it because it doesn't allow me to think, right? It's the same for content. When I write content, I ask for the first draft to AI. Yes, I'm doing that. And it's the same thing. I hate it because it means that I'm not thinking as hard as before.
From a software supply chain point of view, AI is real, and it's actually a new type of ingredient that's going into software builds. You're deploying a language model or a data produced by it as part of your builds. It's really just another type of artifact, and it's a rapidly growing type of artifact. Not to make a Cloudsmith corporate picture, but something we're trying to figure out is how do we help companies manage the ingestion and the deployments, the safe management of that as another type of artifact. So
yeah, sometimes those machine learning companies have the worst workflows.
That's one thing that we're trying to do in Nearform, is to try to help clients to understand how to best leverage AI, because there is a danger there, right? As you say, is the old, where the information is coming from and what type of information this tool is going to push out, because we don't understand how those tools generate information. We don't know. We are unpredictable. So especially if you're putting those tools in front of your clients, you have to be very careful what you do there.
I think disclosure is the watchword of the day right now. And, that's a pretty important line in your SBOM, is exactly what AI is being deployed with this application.
That's right.
Yeah. So with that, I think we'll try to wrap it up. Thank you so much to Luca, to Glenn, to Josh. I hope you enjoyed today. So talk to you later. Bye.